The battlefield made them legends, their leadership changed history. But when the war ended, what happened next? Some went into politics, some took on high-profile civilian roles, and some, their post-military lives were shockingly tragic. Today we're diving into the little-known stories of what happened to America's greatest generals after the war. Stay with us because one of these men had an ending so shocking you won't believe it. Let's start with one of the most iconic names in military history, General George S. Patton. The hard-charging, pistol-waving, no-nonsense general who led American forces to victory in North Africa, Sicily, and deep into Nazi Germany. Patton was a warrior to his core, famous for his aggressive tactics and brutal honesty. But when World War II ended, so did his usefulness, at least in the eyes of Washington. Patton made no secret of his hatred for the Soviet Union and openly criticized U.S. policy, calling the Soviets the real enemy. That didn't sit well with the politicians, and instead of a heroic post-war role, he was sidelined. Then, in December 1945, just months after the war ended, Patton was paralyzed in a freak car accident in Germany. The official story? A tragic accident. But some believe it was something more, a setup to silence one of America's most outspoken generals. He died shortly after, saying, "This is a hell of a way to die." From conquering armies to dying in a hospital bed, Patton's story is a brutal reminder that warfighters don't always get the ending they deserve. While Patton's career ended in tragedy, General Dwight D. Eisenhower's was just getting started. As the supreme Allied commander of World War II, Eisenhower orchestrated the D-Day invasion and led the Allied forces to victory in Europe. Unlike Patton, Eisenhower played the political game perfectly. After the war, he became president of Columbia University, but that was just a pit stop. By 1952, the Republican Party was begging him to run for president. He resisted at first, but when the time came, he won in a landslide. As the 34th President of the United States, Eisenhower built the interstate highway system, expanded nuclear deterrence, and, perhaps most famously, warned America about the growing power of the military-industrial complex. From general to commander-in-chief, Eisenhower didn't just win wars, he shaped the future of America. Then there was General Douglas MacArthur, the larger-than-life commander who led U.S. forces in the Pacific during World War II. MacArthur didn't just win battles, he rebuilt nations. After the war, he took charge of occupying and reconstructing Japan, transforming it into an economic powerhouse. But MacArthur wasn't done fighting. When the Korean War broke out, he led U.S. and Allied forces in a daring counterattack that pushed the North Koreans back. Then in classic MacArthur fashion, he got too aggressive. China entered the war, and MacArthur wanted to bomb China directly, possibly with nuclear weapons. That put him in direct conflict with President Truman. MacArthur didn't back down. He criticized Truman publicly, challenged his authority, and in 1951, Truman fired him. It was one of the most controversial military decisions in American history. MacArthur came home to a hero's welcome and even considered running for president. But the political world had moved on. He spent his final years in quiet retirement, writing his memoirs and giving the occasional speech, including his famous farewell to Congress. Old soldiers never die, they just fade away. Fast forward to the Gulf War, and you get General Norman Schwarzkopf, the man who led Operation Desert Storm in 1991. A war that lasted just 100 hours. Schwarzkopf was a no-nonsense commander, leading a coalition force that obliterated Saddam Hussein's army. The American people loved him. After the war, there were whispers that he might follow in Eisenhower's footsteps and run for office. But unlike Ike, Schwarzkopf wanted nothing to do with politics. He retired, wrote a memoir, and disappeared from the public eye. He lived the rest of his life in Florida, passing away in 2012, remembered as one of the most decisive generals of modern warfare. Then there's General James Mattis, the warrior monk of the Marine Corps, a living legend who led Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan. Known for his brutal honesty and no-BS leadership style, Mattis became one of the most respected military minds of the 21st century. When Trump tapped him to be Secretary of Defense in 2017, it seemed like a perfect fit. But Mattis wasn't a yes man. He clashed with Trump on key policies, especially regarding troop withdrawals. In 2018, he resigned in protest, writing a now famous letter that made headlines worldwide. Since then, he stayed mostly quiet, teaching, writing, and advising. A warrior to the core, but one who refused to play the political game. These generals shaped history on the battlefield, but their post-military lives were just as fascinating. Some found new ways to serve, some clashed with Washington, and some couldn't live without war. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Do you think today's military leaders could follow in their footsteps? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love military history and want more deep dives into the stories that shaped America, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. More history, more heroes, and more truth coming soon. Stay strong, stay sharp, stay free.